We are Cactus Wrestling. Today we're going to be talking about the transfer portal. Dun,
The
dun,
portal.
dun. Um,
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of controversy behind this with in conjunction with the NIL and the amount of top talent that is entering the transfer portal this year alone. We're going to dive into some of the biggest names and kind of our thoughts on the entirety of the transfer portal. So biggest name probably on there, Shane Griffith, NCAA champion. I get it in his case because he kind of said that he's exhausted all of his educational options at Stanford. He's a grad student level, so if he wants one more crack in college, he kind of has to go somewhere else. So I get that, but a lot of these names, um, you know, I don't know. I think they're just switching allegiances midway through their careers. And what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you make a good point. Graduate, it's like, okay, I exhausted all my options at this university. I'm not really, abandoning them, but like I have nothing to stay for. So that kind of makes sense. I mean, Real Woods last year, very similar. Like he graduated Stanford, transferred to Iowa. He still got eligibility there. So that's why he's sticking around. He was more of a graduate transfer. So those kind of ones. But then, yeah, we're seeing a lot of All Americans here that are just like leaving the school that they just All Americaned at within like a month of All Americaning at your school. So definitely somewhat surprising to see.
Yeah, I think that the transfer portal's got a lot of pros and cons to it. I think that it sucks for like a team like Northwestern that's continuing to lose guys.
Yeah,
With guys
they're
like
losing three superstars they have.
yeah, and guys go there and they make their bones. I mean, it's the same thing that happened with Sebastian Rivera. Is that hey, like I went to Northwestern over Rutgers, and now I'm leaving for Northwestern to go to Rutgers. Michael
Right.
DiAugustino, we just saw it. Lucas Davidson. I mean, these guys are guys that you know went to Northwestern over other schools, and whether
Yeah.
it be for recruitment options or financial or because it was a better education. It's just interesting that they're Chris Cannon too, especially
Yeah.
now. These guys are all leaving, and you go, well, what the heck? And it seems like they usually want to go to a few, only a few places make their list, and it's usually the top teams in NCAA's.
Yeah. Yeah, like Iowa and Penn State usually
Yeah,
are nabbing up someone, which is, I mean, evidenced by even Luke. Oh, in Michigan, Lucas Davidson's going there. Bernie
yep.
Truex going to Penn State.
Yeah,
Like,
but
Shane Griffith.
we've seen this 2 years now with Max Dean transferring out of Cornell to go to Penn State, and now Bernie Truax doing the same thing,
well,
transferring
and
out
then
of
you could
Cal
even
Poly.
say you could argue with Iowa's 141. You had
Real Woods,
before Real Woods, you had
Jaden Ironman.
Jaden Ironman. Yeah,
Jaden Iron,
exactly.
yep.
So like,
What's interesting though about this is that like these guys have said like, oh yeah, like they're not recruiting me. I just want to go there. Like Max Dean
yeah,
cold called Penn State, and he's like, hey, like, would you have a spot for me? And they're like, well, we have Michael Beard, but like, if you want to come here, that's fine. Like they
you want to
weren't,
come and try and win out the spot, then go for
yeah,
it.
like they
But
weren't like, I can only speak for Penn State because I know their story. I don't know Iowa, but I
yeah,
know like Gabe Dean got in touch with him. He's like, hey, like, we don't know if Cornell's going to have a season. All this stuff's going on with COVID. Um, you know, we're exploring our options. And Penn State wasn't like, oh my gosh, like Max Dean, please come here. They were just like, hey, like, we'll
if
just
you
do it.
want, come on down.
And that's the same thing with Bernie Truow, is
Yeah,
that he was like, hey, like, I wanted to go here since I was little. And, I still want to go there. Um,
yeah.
and supposedly, you know, wrestling's Twitter is very interesting. People talked about up to a $250,000 single season NIL deal for Bernie if he went to Iowa. No one can prove anything. People usually just talk out of their butt.
Whoa, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but if that is the case, and NIL could be a whole nother discussion,
Yeah,
why wouldn't
yeah,
he
you're
go
getting
there?
that. Yeah, why wouldn't you?
I
So
get the sense that a lot of these guys they don't necessarily think of the NIL.
Yeah.
as their first reason. Like, oh, I want to get paid. I want to get endorsements and sponsorships. I
Yeah.
think a lot of these guys, they're just wrestlers and they want to
Yeah.
get better at wrestling. And a guy like Aaron Nagao at Minnesota, he's just kind of exploring his options. He might stay at Minnesota.
Yeah, he said that.
Yeah, that's crazy. How like, I got my top 4 schools, and Minnesota was one of them. It was like, what? You might, after all this, you might not even leave.
It's the Kale Sanderson effect. I feel like a broken record. I feel like everyone says this, but guys want to wrestle for him. Aaron Nagao, you know, Bernie Truax,
Drew
Mitch
Hildebrand.
Messin. Yeah, Drew Hildebrand.
Yeah.
Mitchell Messenbrink just switched from Cal Poly as well, I think. And like, so, like they must have offered you a huge NIL deal. And like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, we just want to wrestle for Kale. Like, we just want to be in the Penn State room. I mean,
Right.
Kyle Dake switched from Cornell, Spartan Combat, RTC, to wrestle for NLWC. I mean, they have a system that works there. And I think people just want to be a part of it. And they say, the best way to reach my success is to go with this direction. And I'm super thankful for a coach that gave me the option to get better so I can now explore this direction.
Yeah. Even All-American Izzy Alejnik is in there.
Oh, from Harvard? Oh,
no, Northern Illinois.
Yeah. Well, I know that like the Harvard, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, the 285 from Harvard.
Yeah, Yaroslav.
Yeah. He ran out of eligibility. So same thing as Shane Griffith. He's like, I can't stay here. So, and they knew that going into the season. Ran out of, school eligibility, but he still has athletic eligibility left. He can only be at Harvard for so many years.
Right.
Well, a guy like Yaroslav, I mean, his decision to transfer into Rutgers has a direct impact on a guy like Boone McDermott, who he wants to wrestle one more year, but he's getting his spot taken. I mean, this is guy top 6 guy ranked in the country, probably can't beat him. He's like, now I have to leave. I probably was going to stay, but now I probably have to leave if I want to wrestle one more year.
Yeah.
And we saw that with Michael Beard. He was probably like, Max Dean's coming in. Maybe I can beat him, but maybe Kale's giving him the spot over me. I'm going to go to Lehigh now. But it's becoming a lot more like kind of like professional free agency in a way.
Yeah, definitely seems like it's more of a business.
Yeah, it's a little bit more of a business. And from a coaching perspective, I think, Mike, you're right. I don't think a lot of these coaches are actively reaching out. Well, I mean, if you see Shane Griffith in the portal, you got to make a call. But I don't know. I feel like if a guy wants to come to their school, they're not going to turn it down. Like Kale's not going to push away Max Dean.
Yeah.
So the coaches have to be more inclined. It's tougher for a school like an App State where you have a Caleb Smith. This is a mid-major school on the top 25 program. They're losing a big guy in that room that draws top recruits inwards.
Yeah, 5 seed at NCAAs. I mean, granted, he went 0-2, but like still, he was the 5 seed. And you also never see. He's going to Nebraska. You never see the reverse. You don't see like a guy from Nebraska that was like top-toted guy going to App State, transferring to App State. Like you don't see the opposite. It's always they go from the small school to this bigger name school.
Not necessarily. Steve O'Poulin, NC State to Northern Colorado.
Yeah.
And Bryce.
Well,
Meredith,
he wasn't a proven entity when he transferred.
Bryce Meredith from NC State to Wyoming.
Again, he hadn't started either yet.
What about this? What about Seth Gross from Iowa to South Dakota State?
Well, that was also before he won.
Get jacked. Yeah.
That was before he did anything big. All of those big transfers that they made big noise, but I think they were all going to be backups on the teams, and then they transferred and then did better than the starting guy that would have started above them.
What do you guys think? Is the transfer portal out of control, or do we like it?
I mean,
it's
kind of like seeing, oh shoot, so and so's in the portal, mixed match, but at the same time, I kind of like seeing the loyalty that some guys have to their program.
I feel like this has been an issue forever though, and it's just like now getting bigger. I mean, like Tom Ryan was a walk-on for Iowa, and he was a multi-time national finalist from Syracuse. That's where he was wrestling prior. And he just, he showed up in the room and Dan Gable was like, "Hey, who are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm Tom Ryan. I want to wrestle for you." And he's like, "Okay, well, you can't do that if you're sitting against the wall. So let's get into practice."
Right.
So I just think that good teams are always going to be good, and
Yeah.
smaller teams are always going to struggle. And
Yeah.
I just don't know how they're going to fix it because
Well, yeah, because if you don't have to cultivate the talent just
yeah,
calls you up and says, "Hey, I want to come."
because I mean, like you have the
Turn them
top guys in
away.
the country anyway aren't going to be like, oh yeah, number one guy in the class this year who is Christian Carroll for going, these guys don't usually say like, oh man, like I'm a pound for pound champion. I'm one of the best. I cannot wait to wrestle Division Two. I'm so jazzed. Like like at that level, they're like, hey, I'm only going to one of these five schools.
Right.
So even if you get rid of the whole transfer portal, you say, hey, you can't transfer. The good teams are still going to be the good teams because they're more likely for people to want to go there.
Right.
I mean,
I
go
mean, I
ahead.
don't think that it's realistically they can put on something like you cannot transfer. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe put restrictions or possibly put something like a penalty of some sort, but like
sit
there's
for a
no way you can
season.
say, no, you have to stay at this school. You chose it once, now you're stuck there.
I don't know. It definitely seems like there's some issues, but again, like I don't think there's a solution for it because people are still going to want to wrestle for the brands. People are still going to want to wrestle for Kale.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and
so
that and Iowa and Penn State, they're fully funded programs. Some of these smaller
yeah,
schools, they don't have 9.9 scholarships.
Yeah.
Maybe they can only hand out 3 or 4, so they don't really have a crack at a top transfer in the portal, unless there's some sort of story. I think, Steve O'Poolin's case. He's a upstate New York guy, and he wanted to wrestle for Troy Nickerson. He probably knows him. Troy Nickerson's a New York guy, so there's probably some connection there. Um, Other than that, I don't see why, you know, a guy would want to go to kind of a random smaller school unless they already have that relationship in play.
Right.
yeah. I mean, I don't think it happens. I mean, some people do, go from like, uh, you know, they work, they get kind of tired of wrestling, but they don't want to do it. Like I know Eamon Tolland from Connecticut, like he was wrestling for like Wisconsin lacrosse, who's tough D3 program, and I think just with the way his career was going for college and work, he's like, hey, like I still want to wrestle, but maybe I want to kind of don't want to be in that environment. And I think he finished. He's like, I know he's wrestling at UConn right now, and he's loving it. And he's much happier. So I think you see that every now and then, where someone's like, hey, like I was at this big school or, I was at this very competitive program and I didn't feel like I was getting the maybe attention that I either deserved or I wanted, or, I didn't feel like the coaching staff had my best interest. And sometimes I transfer for that to a smaller school that I feel like I could maybe get more individualized attention, develop better because I have a better relationship, or even just like, hey, like I love wrestling, but my career I want to focus on. So I don't want to be so, you know, into D1 is a job for some people. And a lot of these top D2 and D3 schools, people are like, oh, well, it's D2, it's D3. But if you're wrestling for Wartburg in Iowa for, their D3 school, like they're basically D1. Like you're working just as hard as these top D1 schools. I mean, it's the way it
Yeah.
goes
There's a reason
sometimes.
they have as much success as they do as a team in D3. So
Yeah.
Well, and the
So
other thing is we kind of treat these guys as if they're like, full-time athletes, but they're student athletes and
yeah,
they could
exactly.
be just training for academic reasons. And you would hope that they're that's the reason why they're making these types of choices. I know a
Yeah.
lot of them are probably, they're in school mainly to focus on wrestling. But
yeah.
that's another play too. You can't discount, like, these are student athletes. This is
Mhm.
amateur wrestling. We're not talking about professionals. And it's not, it's kind of unfair to treat it as if this is like a professional free agency of sorts. Because a lot of these kids, I mean, freshmen, they're 18, 19 years old. They don't know if they made the right decision when they're committing in high school to a program.
Yeah.
And as they get older, their values may change a little bit as well.
I mean, that happened with Greg Kirkley is that he originally committed somewhere and then went to Ohio State. And before he even stepped on the mat at Ohio State, he transferred to Penn State. And, Ohio State, a great program,
Yeah.
one of the top every year, but he was like, it didn't fit. He's like, I didn't gel with the coaching staff like I thought I would kind of situation. And he left. So, sometimes these 18-year-olds, you can commit as like a 16-year-old now and you commit, you're like, oh, this is where I want to go. And then you get there like, it's actually not what I thought it was going to be at all. So, but yeah, I think the portal's got a lot of awesome stuff to it. But unfortunately, you don't see these smaller schools benefiting from it.
Never, not never, but
Yeah, but
never.
rarely. It's tough.
Yeah, it's more lopsided. What do you guys think? What do you think about the transfer portal? Is it out of hand? Does there need to be some sort of change in place, or do we like it and want it to stay the way it is, status quo? Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe and tell your friends about the channel. We are Cactus Wrestling.
Thanks for watching. We are Cactus Wrestling, and we'll see you next time on our next video.